Life sometimes feels like a cruel test, breaking people down to their last ounce of hope before revealing a miracle. For Emily, a young nurse who had given her life to caring for others, the world seemed to have drained her of everything: her strength, her savings, and even her spirit. She sat alone in a small cafe on a rainy evening, staring at the coffee cup in front of her. The warm steam rising from it was the only comfort she could afford, and it had cost her the last $5 she had left. She sipped slowly, almost afraid to finish it too quickly, as if stretching those few moments could help her forget the harsh reality waiting outside. Backhand index pointing. Right before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and miracles that arrive when we least expect them, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. I Am Kindness Corner. Your support keeps these inspiring stories alive. Emily's story wasn't one of recklessness or laziness. She had worked tirelessly for years in a small hospital, pulling extra shifts, caring for strangers through exhaustion and tears. But life had its way of punishing the most selfless souls. Medical bills for her sick mother had swallowed her savings, a landlord demanding rent had pushed her to the edge, and inflation made every grocery trip feel like a battlefield. She lived with quiet dignity, never complaining, never showing her patients how heavy her burden was. Yet, when she looked into the mirror at night, she saw tired eyes that carried the weight of an entire world. Her friend had insisted she go on a blind date that evening, saying she deserved at least one night of happiness. Emily had resisted at first. How could she think about dating when she didn't even know if she could afford food tomorrow? But loneliness has a way of gnawing at the strongest hearts, and against her better judgment, she agreed. She didn't dress extravagantly, she simply wore her plain blue nurse's dress with a gray sweater, brushing her hair neatly, hoping it was enough. When she entered the cafe, she realized she couldn't just sit empty-handed while waiting. Everyone around her had drinks, conversations, or laptops glowing in front of them. She had to buy something, anything, to avoid looking out of place. That's when she handed over her last crumpled $5 bill for a small cappuccino. Watching the cashier take it away felt like watching the last drop of her security vanish. She sat at the corner table, her heart heavy, her mind whispering that she had made a mistake. Minutes passed, and she wondered if her blind date would even show up. Perhaps it was just another disappointment in a life full of them. But then the cafe door opened, and in walked a man with a quiet confidence, dressed neatly but not extravagantly. His presence seemed to draw the attention of others without him trying. He scanned the room until his eyes met hers, and he smiled warmly before walking over. Emily's heart raced. Not out of romantic excitement, but out of anxiety. She felt embarrassed, sitting there with a nearly empty cup she couldn't afford to refill. The man introduced himself as Daniel. From the moment he sat down, Emily felt something unusual. Unlike most people she had met, he didn't talk over her or try to impress her with flashy words. Instead, he asked about her work, about her struggles. Emily hesitated at first, but something about his gaze made her feel safe. Without meaning to, her walls began to crumble, and for the first time in months, she found herself speaking honestly. She told him about being a nurse, about her long shifts, about caring for patients who sometimes passed away in her arms. She admitted how drained she felt, how the bills were piling up, how she wasn't sure how much longer she could carry on. Daniel listened without interrupting, his eyes softening with every word. He didn't pity her, and that was what surprised her most. He looked at her as if she was the strongest person he had ever met. That simple respect, that quiet admiration, touched Emily's soul deeper than she expected. For so long, she had felt invisible, like a background character in her own life. But here was someone making her feel seen. The evening stretched on, and their conversation flowed naturally. Emily laughed, an unfamiliar sound to her own ears, and she almost forgot about the storm waiting in her real life. Yet, when the waitress came to ask if they wanted another round of drinks, Emily panicked. She shook her head quickly, embarrassed, knowing she couldn't afford even a cookie. Daniel ordered for himself but noticed the shadow that crossed her face. What Emily didn't know was that Daniel wasn't just an ordinary man. He had grown up in poverty himself, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. He remembered what it felt like to count every coin, to pray that kindness might show up in unexpected places. But Daniel's life had taken a dramatic turn years ago when he built a small healthcare company that grew into one of the leading medical organizations in the country. Today, he was a wealthy CEO, though he never flaunted it. Deep down, he remained the same boy who knew the value of $5. As he sat across from Emily, he saw more than just a tired nurse. He saw his mother's resilience in her eyes, his own past struggles in her story, and a rare kind of strength that couldn't be bought. Something in his heart stirred, telling him this meeting wasn't an accident. When their date ended, Daniel insisted on walking Emily home. She resisted at first, feeling ashamed of her modest apartment building, but he was gentle and persistent. Standing outside her small, worn-down complex, Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He knew she was too proud to accept charity, but he also knew he couldn't just walk away. That night, he promised himself he would find a way to help her, without wounding her pride. Days passed, and Emily returned to her exhausting routine. She assumed Daniel would fade away like most people did. But then, one morning at the hospital, whispers spread among the staff. The hospital had suddenly received a massive anonymous donation that cleared several debts, funded new equipment, and even provided bonuses for the nurses who had been underpaid for years. Emily was stunned but too busy to think much of it. She simply thanked God for the miracle. A week later, Daniel appeared again, this time at the hospital. He wasn't there as a patient or visitor, he was meeting with the board. Emily's jaw dropped when she realized the truth. Her blind date was not just a kind man, but the very donor who had transformed their struggling hospital. He smiled when he saw her, but he said nothing about his role. Instead, he simply asked if she would like to have coffee with him again. Emily's eyes welled with tears. She had spent her last $5 thinking it was wasted, but that night had led her to a man who valued her for her heart, not her wallet. For Daniel, meeting Emily reminded him of his roots and rekindled his belief in the quiet heroes of the world, the nurses, the caregivers, the unseen fighters. Their relationship grew slowly, built not on wealth or grand gestures, but on respect, empathy, and shared values. Emily continued her nursing, but now with renewed energy, knowing someone truly believed in her. And Daniel, despite his riches, often said that Emily was the one who gave him the greatest gift, the reminder that love and kindness are the real treasures of life. As months passed, Emily no longer felt invisible. She realized that sometimes the lowest moments, the night you spend your last dollar, the night you think the world has forgotten you, are the very moments that lead to destiny. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to I Am Kindness Corner. Your support helps us bring more inspiring true-to-life stories to people who need hope. Speech balloon special request: before you leave, please comment below, "Kindness changes lives," to remind the world that small acts of compassion can create miracles. And so, the nurse who once sat alone in a cafe with only $5 left, discovered that the most extraordinary blessings often come disguised as ordinary encounters. Sometimes, the person sitting across from you isn't just a blind date, they're the beginning of a miracle you never saw coming.